afternoon, everybody. My name is Isaac Montoya, and I am the Director of Marketing here at Upside Technologies. I would like to thank you all for joining us here today for week 3 of our 6th annual Airflow Management Awareness Month. We started this initiative back in 2015 with the intent to not only raise awareness around airflow management, but also around cooling optimization, energy efficiency, and overall data center performance. We received a great deal of support from the industry over the last few years, and we are happy to be here for our 6th consecutive year. In addition, I'd like to also call attention to the icon at the top right of the screen. This year at Upside, we are celebrating 20 years as a company, and we would like to give a quick thanks to all of our partners, resellers, and customers for helping us get this far. As for today, I'll be joined here shortly by Bill Clayman, Executive Vice President of Digital Solutions at Switch, who will be headlining today's webinar to discuss the perimeter-less data center and take a look at security, automation, and robotics. We will also be joined here by Lars Strong, Senior Engineer and Company Science Officer here at Upside Technologies, who will give a brief introduction for today's presentation. Before I pass it off, I'd like to go over a couple quick housekeeping items. Everybody will be muted throughout the duration of the webinar just to eliminate any background noises. But we do encourage you to ask as many questions as you would like, and you could do so using the Q&A module in your Zoom dashboard. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of this presentation, but feel free to ask them throughout the presentation, and we will get to as many as we can. If you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to shoot me a chat in the chat module, and I will try to resolve those for you as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, this is week 3 of our annual Airflow Management Awareness Month. In week 1, we were joined by Mark Acton, independent consultant and non-executive director at Ecosense, who gave a great presentation on data center energy efficiency and sustainability. Last week, we were joined by Lars Strong, who gave a very informative presentation on data center containment considerations and how to maximize ROI. If you happen to miss either of those presentations, feel free to shoot me a message in the chat, and I can provide you with a link where you can watch those on demand. Next week, we'll be joined by John Gross, owner and engineer at JM Gross Engineering and ASHRAE contributor, who will discuss what's new in ASHRAE's 5th edition of thermal guidelines and how it can impact your facility. If you haven't registered for that session, we will also be providing a link for that later in the webinar for you to do so if you'd like. Now, without further ado, I'd like to pass off to Lars for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Isaac, and welcome everyone. Well, we're really excited to have Bill Clayman joining us today to discuss this important topic. For those of you who don't know, Bill is a regular contributor to the Upside Technologies blog, where he speaks on many topics surrounding emerging technologies like the ones you'll hear about today, as well as data center trends, data center energy efficiency, and many others. Bill is part of many organizations in the industry, including AFCOM and the iMasons, and is the annual presenter and a key contributor to Data Center World's annual State of the Industry report. He is a very active member in the technology industry. He was ranked number 16 globally in the Analytica study that reviewed the top 100 most influential individuals in the cloud landscape, and number 4 in another Analytica study that reviewed the industry's top data security experts. Over the last few months, he's authored many articles on the Upside blog related to zero trust and automation that have caught the attention of many people in the industry. So, this topic is top of mind for many of us, especially over the past year. As the industry has experienced unprecedented demand due to the effects of COVID-19, and while the industry, showed a great amount of resiliency, there were also many lessons learned in terms of security, remote monitoring, and management, and even robotics. So while these unprecedented times have exposed some vulnerabilities for the industry, they have also accelerated the adoption of various technologies. Much of this and the evolution towards a perimeterless data center is the topic of today's presentation. So with that, I'll pass it off to Bill.
Thank you so much, Lars, and thank you so much, Isaac. And I'm really excited to have everybody here joining us. I know that the conversation, the topic is Airflow Awareness Month. So I'm hoping with some of the information I'm going to give you, you're going to be able to breathe a little easier. All right, that's the last of the dad joke. All right, we are going to have some really great conversation points here. We're going to talk about some of the really interesting advancements that are happening in our space. We're going to discuss let me get to the next menu slide here. Findings from the latest AFCOM State of the Data Center report. I'm going to actually give you some of the fun snippets, some of my favorite points of conversation that are going to be talking about DSIM, AR, VR, how that's going to be impacting our data center technologies and what's happening in our ecosystems. We'll talk about robots and automation. And before we start, I do have an article up on Upsite that says, no, the robots are not going to take over our jobs. They're not going to be racking and stacking our infrastructure, but they're going to be augmenting some of the skill sets that we've got. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then kind of the title of this conversation, goodbye perimeter, hello distributed compute and zero trust. Friends, this is a question for the first time that we asked our audience. So this was the AFCOM Data Center World State of the Data Center folks. And we asked them about security modeling, security postures, and what they feel is going to be happening when it comes to zero trust. So a lot of really interesting points and findings here that I'm going to be going through with you and reviewing a little bit there as well. So the first thing we need to talk about is how if you're sick of this pandemic conversation, I'm really not trying to focus on it, but we are truly becoming a very much focused digital society where we have so many new things, technologies that stick, let's call them, and that are impacting all aspects of our lives. In the course of 2020, I was able to do some research to find out where we embraced virtual ecosystems, where we embraced these milestones, what's actually happening in our world. And by the way, I love an interactive audience. So if you have a question or a comment or anything like that, I know Isaac's monitoring the Q&A. If you have anything at all you want to talk about, please go ahead and pop that into the Q&A, and we'll have some time towards the end to discuss this. But I know I can't see you, but I know you're hanging out with me, and I'm wondering which of these firsts, I guess let's call them firsts, maybe you experience right alongside me as well. And what's fascinating here is that these technologies, let's take a look at these solutions, these parts of our lives are very much here to stay and are going to become very much, I think, at least in some part, a new normal, right? So 64% had technology firsts in the last year. And here's the thing, right? 81% will continue to use new tech skills post-COVID. Video conferencing, telehealth services, ordering groceries, reading on a coded menu, takeout apps, banking. I wish I could just throw it up in the chat window. Let me know which one of these were really firsts for you. If you did like your first ever Instacart or your first ever telehealth service, for example. I mean, I know I had a couple of firsts here as well. In virtual experiences, right? Almost 70% attended some kind of a major life event, or 38% had a major life milestone. And my goodness, I know it was sad that we couldn't be there in person, but at least we leverage these technologies to connect and to be with our friends, to be with each other, whether it's a doctor's appointment, a birthday, a conference. And here's the thing. I miss you. I miss people, right? And I cannot wait for August, where that's going to be my first ever live and in-person conference. I'm going to be up on the main stage during the keynote, just stare at people awkwardly because I miss faces. But look at this. Look at those bottom statistic. People want that IRL, that in real life experience post COVID. And not that many are going to be experiencing virtual, right? 8% and then 5% of major life stones. People are wanting to get back to what is normal, right? And what's reality today is that we are all digital natives, whether you like it or not. Congratulations. Everyone on this call gets a gold star because you've had to operate in some way in this digital realm. So let's go ahead and dive in to the survey, right? Trends that drive our market in the industry. And some of the things that certainly I've been seeing out there. There was a question that we asked that kind of, I don't want to say raised some eyebrows, but it was a very, very interesting question, right? We wanted to find out renovations and density and what people are doing as far as actually building new facilities and what that's going to look like. So remarkably, many are actually holding still, right? And there's a bit of a balance here between why we saw these numbers, right? Where some are still building some new data centers within the next 3 years. The future continues to look more efficient and way more dense. So we decided to look a little bit more closely into this. And some of the things that we found is that organizations, whether it's ESG, social governance, or a focus on that E part of ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance, trying to become more dense, we've seen something known as the hyperscale shift, right? Where organizations are starting to focus and look at data center ecosystems that are way, way more efficient. In 2016, there was a really interesting report from the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab that estimated if 80% of servers in small US data centers were moved to hyperscale facilities, it would result in a 25% drop in energy use. Now, let me put a little asterisk there. It's not necessarily just hyperscale facilities. It's infrastructures that are simply much, much more efficient. So this is a big part of the conversation we've got today, right? Whether we're talking about DSIM, whether we're talking about your data center specifically, cooling efficiency and improved airflow. I mean, it's not surprised they're a big part of this. I recently read a report where you can see massive differential savings in terms of efficiency within your data center when you put in things like air optimized racks, versus non-air optimized, or have specific parts in your data center that are supporting improved airflow. I know I made a joke about this easier, but literally helping your data center and your ecosystem breathe better. The thing with all of these efficiencies is that you can't see them, right? You put in a rack, you put in some grommets, you put in some stuff, and you're like, okay, I'm assuming this stuff is working. But the reality, especially in the hyperscale or larger co-location facilities, is that efficiency is in the nature of the business. Period, right? Whereas maybe Nike just wants to continue to make shoes, or a baker wants to continue to make bread. Data centers is not necessarily what they're good at. But for those organizations that take a step back and saying, hang on a second, this guy Bill, who drinks way too much coffee, might have a point. Are we actually looking at our corporate data centers and our ecosystems, our edge environments, our closets, our smaller locations, and are we doing what we can to not be literally spending money in the air by making our ecosystems more efficient? This is why so many are seeing this hyperscale shift, a movement towards more efficient ecosystems where smaller, less efficient data centers are slowly being removed and shut down. Now, for whatever it's worth, there's a really fun stat from Gartner, and I know I might get some people yelling at me for this, but this is an interesting point. 80% of enterprises will shut down traditional data centers. In fact, many, only 10% right now, are doing this today, and we are going to continue to see this over the next about 5 to 6 years, where they're going to be shutting down their traditional data centers. Now, again, where some might be moving for hyperscale, that's not necessarily the only way to become more efficient. It's really an introspective, reflective moment for yourself, because come on, you know that your users need this technology. You know that your organization, your business needs this technology. There's going to be no slowdown. Almost every single news feed that I've read states that people are not going to go back to, I'm using air quotes, I know you can't see, normal, right? There's not going to be a normal. People are going to say, wait, hang on a second, I like being with my family a little bit more. Maybe I'm going to travel less. I'm going to use these virtual technologies. Or people are going to say, I could have replaced 18 meetings with an email or a video conference. I'm going to try and use these solutions a little bit more effectively. So remember, working with these kinds of technologies does not mean that you just have to pack up and leave into a larger co-location facility, unless that's what you want to do. But inside your own environment, you might think that you've got some things running, doing things like computational fluid dynamics, understanding where you have holes, where you have inefficiencies. I mean, little things like a grommet or an air panel, anything within your data center can create an improved airflow architecture. Just something to think about, because again, we are talking about an airflow awareness month. And a big part of that, a huge part of that, is efficiency and going green. All right. Let's talk about something a little bit even more fun. Over the past few conferences, I have had the chance. Let me rephrase that. Over the past few conferences that I've been able to attend, which stopped in very early 2020, I've been able to attend these, and I've been able to hang out with some really cool vendors that have been showcasing technology that's going to be going into the data center pretty soon. I'm certain of that involve things like 3D modeling, digital twins, augmented reality, and virtual reality, especially when it comes to data center infrastructure management, right? Working with data-driven solutions that are all of a sudden predictive and prescriptive. Now, outside of me enjoying looking silly with these things, yes, I don't usually just walk around with my hands out like that when I have a goggle set on me. These are so cool, friends. And these kinds of technologies are kind of already here today. Now, I want to kind of point out the pictures that you're looking at here. So the one on the left where it says Discover Automation and Augmented Reality autonomous solutions and augmented reality architecture. I'm looking, this is an Oracle event where they are looking at facilities management, right? So you can look at an entire facility, and that right there on the left, that's AR. So I'm actually able to see the real world that is overlapped with this digital information. I can take a look at a building, see how much stuff is open, what's available, what the price is for rent, for example, which floor I can put a facility on or a piece of my infrastructure. What are the capacity of that facility as far as utilities are concerned. I mean, I can literally look around my environment and pull this information down and actually make some really cool decisions, use this little remote control in my right hand to kind of move back and forth. But this was so cool where I'm able to sort of seamlessly look around at a building, at a facility, and actually see what's happening in there. Now, from an infrastructure perspective, some other really cool things is being able to look at an empty space, for example, and seeing how a rack, converged infrastructure, a piece of equipment, a power unit, an air handler, anything can fit into a specific building and facility. And measurements are actually really, really accurate. So you can see this, quote, digital twin in real life through augmented reality and actually kind of make some decisions around it. Now, the one on the right where I look like I'm surfing, I'm not. I know it's hard to see, but if you take a look just to my right, you got those two monitors there. There's a really small little square. Those actually are about 5 racks, real life racks that are in a virtual environment, digital twins. And I can, with my little remote control and my virtual reality headset, open up the rack, pull something out, check a blade out, turn the entire rack around, look at where the wires are, look at where the UPS is, disassemble and reassemble the entire rack. And so all of a sudden, you're starting to see how these facilities are quickly turning into 3D models, digital twins of what we're actually working with, where an architect can put these things on and look at a remote facility to make improvements, to make adjustments, to deploy entirely new sets of equipment without actually having to be there in the environment. This is going to be great for things like edge computing, remote facilities, supporting really complex environments where maybe you can't get somebody out there in an emergency. And please understand that based on these trends and metrics, these kinds of solutions are absolutely in the mix today. And this is some of the stuff that we found from the AFCOM State of the Data Center report. So first of all, security, big point of implementation, both physical and logical, making sure things are patched and updated, make sure you don't have any vulnerabilities or holes. Those are all really important components of a good management system. Asset management, that's a big one right now. 60% have it now, and that's going to continue to grow very much over the next 12 to 36 months because we have more stuff to manage. I mean, quite simply. Environment management, really, really important to have visibility. And again, not just reactive data, predictive and prescriptive, where you can actually look at these and see patterns using machine learning and data-driven technologies, where it's a big part of this to help find patterns in data that we as humans simply can't see. Power, efficiency, and intelligence, also a really, really big one, where we're able to actually see how we utilize power, where green energy is coming from, and how we can make fundamental improvements. Now, I left the two here, the last for some of the best points of conversation. We asked these questions last year as well, integration with smarter systems, so data-driven solutions, and that number was certainly less. 29% have some level of integration with data-driven solutions. Now, hang on to your seats here. Almost 48% are going to be deploying some type of data-driven machine learning architecture within DSIM over the next 3 years. That's not that long, almost like a blink of an eye when it comes to technology. So a part of the question is, when you're looking at DSIM solutions, when you're looking at 3D modeling, being able to better understand airflow and these dynamics of our data centers. So just think about it, right? Asking the question of, do these solutions I have right now have this capability? Is there a roadmap for this in the near future? How am I going to be leveraging data? Because our infrastructures are becoming a lot more smart and a lot more data driven to make better decisions around efficiency, data center management, and so on. Another fun one. I mean, listen, I'm putting these headsets and goggles on for a reason. We've got these really cool trends, 20%. And I'm not surprised. I've actually seen some real world operators using AR and VR in the data center. And here's the kicker. Another 29%, almost 30% are going to have this over the next 12 to 36 months. Augmented reality and virtual reality in the data center. If you're sitting here thinking, oh my God, this guy's insane. Are they really good? Yes, absolutely. We're seeing a new generation of data center managers. Hey, I'm a millennial. I'm just going to put that out there. Don't blame the world on me. We've got Gen Zs now. It's all their fault now. But in that sense, this new generation of data center architects and engineers And people working in digital infrastructure space want to leverage and use these technologies to not only make better decisions, but to make better decisions and improve the quality of the infrastructures that they're working on. And here's the big thing. These systems are absolutely scaling the parameters of what we used to know as data center management into virtual workloads, containers, looking deeper into cloud. Check this out. 89%. 89% came back and said that they're going to see deeper integration with cloud computing, virtualization solutions, and a deeper understanding into how these workloads actually operate within the data center. I mean, go back just a few years and say, hey, you know what, my hypervisor, my VM, all of this stuff is a part of DSIM. People are like, no, just let me deal with my server. Let me deal with the physical infrastructure. I don't want to look at your virtual landscape. That's not the case anymore. And if you think this isn't happening, this is up from 77% last year, where people are going to see this capability to granularly integrate with cloud and virtualization solutions is a really important part of their business. So something to think about when it comes to cloud computing, virtualization, smart systems, and your DSIM architecture. Now, we touched on cloud a little bit. In the report, we asked some really interesting questions around cloud, and specifically things like cloud repatriation. All right, this, if you're on your Amazon shopping list, I know it's Prime Day. Come back here. This is a really important stat. We ask these kinds of questions, right? And there's still some challenges out there when it comes to working with cloud computing, concerns around corporate data, how much is it going to cost me, reliability, latency, sensitivity, GRC and geopolitics are all concerns here as well. But repatriation of workloads has been a massive conversation. There's been some really interesting reports and articles done. And I promise I'm actually going to mention some numbers here around the dollars of what when it makes sense to move your infrastructure from the cloud to a data center environment. But let's talk about the findings from the AFCOM report first. The majority of respondents, about 58%, see a repatriation of workloads from cloud computing back to on-premise data centers or co-locations. Last year, that number was 72%. So before you start thinking that we're not moving as much back, it's not quite the case. It's just that I think there was a lot of projects that happened previously, and now it's still the majority, but it's maybe a little bit of a slower trickle. Now, here's the important part. We dove a little bit deeper into this, and what's really fascinating about this is that there's a balance. Follow me in this. We're finally striking that balance between understanding what needs to live in the cloud and what needs to live on premise. And I really think that's super, super special because we're finally beginning to see where there's efficiencies, what kind of physical infrastructure we need to retain control around, and what types of super agile, highly mobile applications and services and containers, whatever, and application development processes that we need to actually keep in the cloud and what that benefits. Now, all right, I've talked about this, and finally, there's some actually really cool numbers that I can present to you as well that I absolutely found fascinating. So like I said, in the AFCOM report, we saw 58% of respondents indicate efforts around cloud repatriation and a shift away from public cloud options. Okay. This is the crazy cool part. In this recent research, and this is not AFCOM, this is a different one, from A16Z, they said to dimensionalize the cost of cloud and to understand the magnitude of potential savings from optimization, there was a really crazy extreme case of a large-scale cloud repatriation project. Dropbox, you may have heard of them. And the company embarked on its infrastructure optimization initiative in 2016. They saved nearly $75 million over 2 years by shifting the majority of their workloads from public cloud to lower cost, custom-built infrastructure and co-location facilities directly leased and operated by Dropbox. Their gross margin increased from 33% to 67% from 2015 to 2017, which they noted was primarily due to the infrastructure optimization and an increase in revenue during that period, over that time frame. So these are actual real numbers. Now, listen, you don't have to be the size of Dropbox to understand where do I keep my physical infrastructure? How do I manage that? But you do need to actually understand the cost, the dynamics of your cloud operations, what that actually looks like, and how it's impacting your business. Believe it or not, there's an entire new discipline called FinOps, 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 that only looks at the cost, the management, and the value that cloud computing brings to a business and how organizations can leverage that more effectively and what needs to live in the cloud and what needs to live on-prem. The director of the FinOps Foundation said, and I quote, "The dirty little secret of cloud computing is that the spending and the bill never goes down." And I mean, that's partially true. So when you take a look at this, it's no wonder that some are looking at cloud repatriation as a real project, and some are actually looking at ways they can continue to optimize and move their infrastructure in a more hybrid multi-cloud architecture and environment. But again, making sure that they understand the balance of what needs to live in the cloud and what needs to live on-prem. I thought that was an absolutely fascinating find. And we're going to continue to see that balance continue to grow. And I'm kind of excited about that to continue to happen. Now, talking about cloud, let's look at the edge a little bit. In our report, we asked some new questions around edge computing. And we wanted to make sure that we focus on that kind of environment as well. Now, this was fascinating. And if you're in the space, and you're working on this, and by the way, I'm seeing all of these conversations. I'm looking at the chat window here. Sarah, I totally see that you did medical appointments. I'm sorry, you did a virtual funeral here as well. But yeah, a lot of us had these first. By all means, keep stuff coming in the chat window. I'm going to keep an eye on that. I like this conversation that's happening live here. But when we start talking about edge computing, really fascinating conversation here is that we're going to be seeing a different type of edge, right? One where it's software-defined solutions. We're going to see have major impacts on infrastructure at the edge. So a majority, 57%, have implemented some type of software-defined solution. 27% and 30% are going to be doing it more in the near future. 5G and the edge, definitely a partnership in technologies. 45% indicate that they're going to be deploying 5G solutions, and 46% are going to be doing it specifically as part of an edge strategy. I am not going to define edge computing here. I really feel like, if you're curious about that, there's a million different articles out there. And I really think that edge computing is contextual, the very, 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 very highest level. It's the capability to bring data and services as close to the user as possible to reduce any sort of performance issues or latency. I do feel that edge computing is going to be helping us bridge that connectivity gap. You know how we have food deserts, we also have connectivity deserts. And edge computing is going to be a big part of delivering really, really great services, core, sometimes life critical services, think healthcare and pharma, to users in remote locations. And really, these services are going to be unlike they've ever had anything experienced before. So I do think that it's important and a consideration in the near future. So edge computing, very cool stuff. All right, let's move on to something even more cool. All right. Again, this is one of those slides. Come on back. We're going to talk about robots. I'll give you a second. Close your Amazon shopping list. Get off of Google. Stop watching cat videos. Come back. We're really going to talk about robots here for a second in the data center. So here's a conversation we're going to start with. Back at, oh my God, what conference was this? CES? This was CES in 2019. I was able to kind of attend and see. Well, it was in Las Vegas, and my office is out there, so it was kind of easy to pop in. I'm sitting there, and I'm seeing these robots that they're talking about. And this is kind of like the hot conversation topic. And all of a sudden, I see something that really pretty much should have saved 2020. I talked about this in my AFCOM keynote, so I apologize if you're seeing this again. But this was like the coolest thing, the most amazing robot. It was the Charmin robot that literally would just here. This is what it would do. Are you seeing my little GIF here? It would, if you press a button on the app, and it would bring you toilet paper. I can almost hear people laughing, even though everyone's on mute, or at least giggling. All right, I can see some virtual smiles of the many people that are on this call, because literally this thing, you're sitting in the potty, and I have a 3-year-old, so yeah, I said potty. And you press a button on your app, and all of a sudden this thing comes to you. I mean, can you imagine what this would have done in 2020 when there's a toilet paper shortage? Now, I don't think that you're going to see this little Charmin bot roaming around data center halls, but we are potentially going to see more robotics in the data center. Now, let's talk about some of these trends and statistics around that. Now, in the AFCOM report, we asked this question. Again, first time ever asking this question: will robotics and automation systems be deployed within the data center within the next 12 to 36 months? I am going to be honest. I thought that number was going to be a little bit less. 41%. Came back and said, yeah, we believe that robotics and autonomous systems are going to be a part of our environment. And then, sort of diving a little bit deeper with a DCI board, the Data Center Institute board, and asking them, well, what do you think this means? They're saying that, to support edge facilities, remote operations. And it's not like you're going to have Sunny, and if you saw iRobot, or HAL, or insert your scary movie here of iRobot or Ex Machina coming in and racking and stacking service. We're not there yet. The uniqueness and the the contextual elements of a data center, there's just so many non-standardized parts. It's going to be difficult to get that. Now, you've seen Google with their robotic arm and their storage and tape drives just going up and down aisles, removing storage drives. There are new technologies out there like completely fully integrated submerged cooling solutions, for example, where a robotic arm can literally take out an entire blade and put a new one in there without any human interaction. That's robots in the data center. Or, for example, doing things like drone flights for security, concierge services with like a machine that's running around, or, for example, doing things like facial recognition, like in an opt-in setting, or doing things like scanning of license plates in a parking lot to make sure that you're supposed to be there. We're seeing robotics augment capabilities where it's, again, escorting somebody, doing things like for security in healthcare, for example. But in the data center itself, for unmanned, there are deep holes, for example, in security where these solutions can help out. Maintenance of facilities, as far as like being able to roam up and down an infrastructure to make sure everything's okay. But what's really interesting here, the biggest response that I've seen, and by the way, by all means, pop something in the chat window. Let me know what you think. I am keeping an eye on that. People are saying we better understand what robots are going to be doing in our data center. We also understand they're not going to be taking our jobs. So really kind of fascinating stuff there, especially when it comes to what autonomous and robotic systems are going to be doing in our data center. All right. I think this next part is going to be easily one of the most important parts of our conversation. We're going to talk about security, right? This perimeterless architecture, this conversation around what's happening in our environment. We are going to dive into, unfortunately, what some perceive as a scary world. We asked some questions for the first time in the AFCOM State of Data Center report, specifically related to security. And when it comes to that, right, we learned quite a few things. First of all, ransomware, I mean, drum roll, right? Like fifth year in a row that it's at the very top, right? The exfiltration of data is very, very scary. DDoS attacks are very much real. Advanced persistent threats. Now, here's one that I want everyone to listen to: human threats, right? Insider and outsider human threats. This is something that we don't really talk about. There have been bomb threats. There have been actual malicious physical incidents against digital infrastructure and facilities happening. There continues to be physical threats against infrastructure. And believe it or not, whether it's malicious insider, accidental insider, malicious outsider, or accidental outsider threats, people can impact our environments quite a bit. And that's been kind of scary for a lot of folks, whether it's ransomware or whatever the case is. I mean, again, a close number two was the physical impact of what people could potentially do inside of our facilities. So one thing that everyone should be aware of, right? Definitely make sure that your security architecture can support and protect your data, but also make sure that you do protect it against that human element, whether it's risky behavior or actually physical threats to protect your environment. We're going to enter this next conversation point and kind of dive into what I've been seeing as far as like a perimeterless data center. We asked the question, will you be deploying a zero trust security model in the data center in 2021 and beyond? This is the first time we've asked this question. 56% came back and said, yes, we're going to be doing some type of zero trust modeling in our data centers. Now, again, this is absolutely fascinating because we've never had this trend before. So we know that organizations are going to be taking a completely different look at what a data breach looks like and actually supporting a completely new level of security in a zero trust architecture. Because let's be honest, in the past, we used to be in an office. Yes, I know we used to travel a lot and we used to be very dispersed, but beyond anything else, we've pretty much eliminated what a perimeter looks like, especially when it comes to security and the data center. Now, the really interesting part is that risk in 2021 is completely different than what we used to see in the past. COVID-19 was a force accelerator and a perfect storm during 2020 for insiders to put data at risk. Hey, a lot of times it was accidental. Employees are 85% more likely today to leak data and files than they were pre-COVID. So again, a lot has changed, and some of this is going to continue to change as we grow and evolve. Now, a lot of times you want to put trust in people. I understand you do. And you'd think that people know better, but realistically speaking, a lot of times they don't. 35% of workers don't know actually that they've been hacked or bother to change their passwords even after it happens. 49% of employees admit that they click on messages and links from unknown senders during work. 67% are sure that they've received at least one phishing email at work, and 40% of those who received a phishing email didn't report it. how familiar is this to you? You tell me, like, is this something that you're seeing out there? Because this is scary to me. More than 90%, you hope you hear me here, more than 90% of modern day attacks come through the inbox, through phishing attacks. And what's really scary is that these are no longer automated messages. They're now data-driven and AI that will do a scan, a reconnaissance scan against a potential target to make these phishing attacks way more contextualized and way more focused on you, right? So these trends and these stats, I don't report it. Yeah, I'll just click on it during work. Almost 50% will do that, is really, really scary to me. And a part of the reason why you keep seeing news reports about breaches happening in our ecosystem. So, I mean, these new threats, they're happening against systems that all of you are using. Zoom, right? New threats against users, data, applications, and collaboration platforms. I mean, take a look at this. Over the course of 2020, this is absolutely something that we saw happening. 600% increase in COVID-19 phishing emails, right? We saw the vast adoption of these mobile tools that we continue to use, and these targets are aiming at these specific video conferencing tools, data transfer tools. I mean, Cisco WebEx saw a 600% increase, Zoom 350%, Teams 300, Slack by 200%. I mean, again, these are massive numbers. So all of a sudden, we in the data center space need to look at contextual zero trust security very, very closely. And I really implore everyone here, if this is not something you're familiar with, to really begin to take a look at it and understand how this kind of security model can impact you and where you can evolve and actually work with this kind of architecture. So zero trust, the era of a perimeterless security architecture. If this is new to you, totally cool. Believe it or not, zero trust has actually been around for quite some time, but really beyond any other time, we now have the tools and systems in place to actually adopt some of these solutions and put them into action. What is zero trust and can it really help? So it's a concept that's centered on the belief that organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside its perimeters, and instead it must verify anything and everything trying to connect to its systems before granting access. This involves data, devices, networks, workloads, and of course, people, right? Verify identity, the device, the health of the device. So this is actual device interrogation that happens. Verify access and verify services. In the past, these solutions were challenging to implement because they would slow down user logins. They would slow down how users would process, how they would access stuff. Today, that's different, right? We're beyond single factor authentication. The capability to enforce strong policies is making it way more difficult. It used to be way more difficult. Now it's way easier because these systems are faster, much more intelligent, and are capable of delivering these services sort of in real time to make sure that, internet only users, or, there's least privilege access models or device health that was required for wired and wireless networks. All of these points are really important to consider as you sort of grow in your organization, as you emerge in this zero trust era. Now, if you take a look at the model sort of more from a top level perspective, we're gonna examine that. Adopting a zero model. It's not that hard. The bottom line is that it's data authentication is the foundation of zero trust. Users, endpoints, email, and cloud applications have become the communication channels that serve as attack vectors. So, in a zero trust model where you cannot trust anyone or any device, focusing on the perimeter around data protection with intelligent authentication is really one of the best approaches. So, when you deploy this kind of model, you need to understand your users, your roles, the data, the technology that are being used before you can or even the assets that you've got, before you can implement any kind of zero trust model. Here's the big thing. Why were we talking about all this? Why are we talking about a perimeterless data center and this really cool title, Zero Trust? This new adaptive security model around visibility is not dependent on location. Okay? Users and devices and applications and workloads are now everywhere. You can see that. So you cannot enforce zero trust in one location. It must be proliferated across the entire environment. The right users need to have access to the right applications and data at any given time or at the right time. So when we start to take a look at zero trust as a conceptual model, it replaces perimeter-centric security architecture, and it ensures that security and access decisions are dynamically enforced based on identity, device, and user context. So it dictates that only authenticated and authorized users to a device are given access to an application. At the same time, it protects those applications and users from advanced threats on the internet. So again, These solutions assume already flat out that there is no perimeter and that the environment is hostile. I know it sounds scary. I completely understand that, this is the Bill. You're making the environment not trust anyone who's already inside the environment. But that's the point, right? Just because somebody has access to an application, this environment needs to continuously ask, well, why do you have access? Why do you have access for this long? Maybe you need to do things like at least access principles where you might only have access to something for a certain amount of time before you need to request it again. Again, these security architectures can be applied to customers, partners, suppliers, because it can be tailored and tightly controlled. Please understand that this is security truly on the concept that's based on context. And that's how you're building it. Zero trust is truly based on context. Who, what, where, how, when, and why. Who are you? Why are you accessing this stuff? When are you coming in? I mean, all of these points apply to all of these things that you see on there. And are literally helping our organizations and our data centers, our digital infrastructure become much more secure. So something to think about. I want to mention one more thing. I just did a call and a conversation around vulnerability and penetration testing. And for 45 minutes, all the folks talked about was tools, were applications, were hacking methods, and all this stuff. And I asked the question, well, what about people? They're like, well, what do you mean, Bill? What about people? I'm like, well, what about risky behavior? What about, just having people have a shared responsibility model around security? And they're like, well, I guess it's a part of it. I'm like, well, you just spent 45 minutes talking about technology and tools. We need to focus on people as well. There have been multiple really important studies done that showcase specifically that working with users and doing things like user training are exceedingly helpful to make sure that we are supporting users in a new kind of environment. And user training really does help in security awareness. So this is something I don't care if you're an Airflow guy or a girl or whatever the case, wherever you're working, go back to your security teams and talk about this stuff, because why should you care? The world is digitized, right? You're a digital native and a citizen. Congratulations. And crime is following the same trend around digitization. High profile attacks, phishing emails are way more sophisticated. There's new privacy laws that are impacting every single person out there. And there's new kinds of threats like we talked about, spear phishing, phishing attacks, compromises, social engineering, common malware and ransomware, fake websites, and so on. And here's the thing, right? Security is continuously evolving, right? It's not that dangerous, right? It is, right? In 1 in 50 URLs are malicious. Over 90% of malware comes through email. Most breaches involved are using stolen credentials. Now, here's the thing. Do you remember back in the day we used to tell users, hey, as long as you see that little lock icon or HTTPS in the upper left-hand corner, you're good. Stop doing that. That's not the case anymore. That's actually outdated and antiquated security advice, because nearly 1 in 3, you read that right, 1 in 3 phishing sites will use HTTPS and that pretty little green lock to appear legitimate and still steal your data. I've seen this done in all over different states, whether they're spoofing DMV sites, whatever the case is, they'll use HTTPS and make it secure, right? So you have to go deeper and ask more introspective questions to make sure that you are continuously secure. Now, how does user awareness training help the business? It improves the mindset and the behavior, creates a better posture, create a sense of shared secure responsibility, and again, reduces over-reliance on tools and technology specifically. So this is something that's really important to understand, where we're able to broaden out how we actually work with security outside of just, hey, I've got a great malware tool or I've got a great antivirus tool, whatever. We go much deeper than that, right? Meeting compliance, implementing better cybersecurity architectures, fewer infections, higher productivity, and that responsibility absolutely happens because people feel like they're a part of the security process. Now, there's actually a study done over 12 months of ongoing phishing simulations and security awareness training courses. End users are 70% less likely to click through on a phishing message. Now, I mean, that's huge. I mean, just put these two numbers together. You know that more than 90% of threats, malware, and phishing attacks are coming in through your email. So a 12-month ongoing training program will reduce the chances of somebody clicking on that by 70%. I mean, that's quite a bit. It's not perfect, certainly, but that is definitely quite a bit where it can help. My big final point here, as you sort of look at technology, is just know that when it comes to security and working with new kinds of security models, hope is not a good strategy. It really isn't. Sticking your head in the sand and saying this won't happen to me or just hoping and praying is really not an effective model. You need to take action today. And whatever part of the data center or technology or business world you're at, you are a part of the security model as well. And this is exceedingly important, not just for your data center, but here we go. Let's check this out. But so that you can breathe a little better and you can sleep a little bit easier as well. Take this all in. Deep breath, everybody. We're almost done. Isaac, I hope you're getting ready. We're going to be asking some questions here because I think we've got some coming in, which I think is great. The future is truly amazing, right? And I'm so excited to be a part of it, right? We're going to see some really crazy things happening, right? The unhackable quantum internet, where we're going to see quantum key distribution that create a fully secure, unhackable internet, cheaper solar power. There's these really cool things called a perovskite, I think that's called, right? And organic solar cells that give you nearly 100% efficiency. That's going to be so cool to see. Biometric materials, new materials inspired by behavior of living things that have led to self-cleaning clothing, self-repairing buildings, and the elimination of plastic packaging. That's going to be so cool. I cannot wait to see that. But the biggest point here is that the future is certainly amazing. We're all a part of it. We're all a part of this digital world, this native digital architecture that we've designed and developed. And the most important thing is that you never, ever be complacent. Continue to learn, continue to evolve together, continue to ask questions, be curious, not judgmental. Make sure that you are in a room where you can continue to learn and expand your own knowledge, because this world is continuously changing. Just like that little HTTPS lock example that we used to teach our, our parents or whoever else, as long as you see that, you'll be safe. That's not the case anymore. You have to ask deeper secondary and tertiary questions about your environments. That also goes around things like DSIM, management, efficiency. Never think that things are set in stone. Always try and push and strive for better outcomes for your environment. And with that, that's something we can continue to do together as we grow and learn. I expect to see a whole lot of new friends here. These are my social media profiles. Follow me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Shoot me an invite. Let's continue this chat. And if you're curious, you're welcome to shoot me a DM if you want to see the full AFCOM State of the Data Center report. I'll try and send that out to you if you shoot me a note on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'll get that out to you. So I'm going to take a deep breath. I got my big water bottle here. Isaac, I think we have some questions.
All right, thanks, Bill. Great presentation. We do have quite a few questions coming in. For those of you who have not asked yours yet, please get them in, and we will try to get to them. We got about 10 minutes here. So the first one, looks like this one was asked around the time when you're talking about first digital experiences with with COVID and all the impacts of that. So a lot of firsts for sure. Do you think technology fatigue will take place at some point?
Absolutely. 100%. Great question. I mean, one of those trends that you saw is people want that in real life experience. I think the pandemic and the lockdown, we had to be locked down, so we didn't have much of a choice. But in case you haven't noticed, I'm an extrovert. I like people and I do miss you. I miss people. Even if I can't hug you or even give you a high five, just being in your presence already makes me feel a little bit better. So I do feel that technology fatigue is going to take place. What I feel is going to be interesting is that 2020 taught us how to balance, hopefully, technology with interpersonal life. And I think that moving forward, there is not going to be a returning to normal. We are going to be creating, and I hate saying this, a new normal, right? A new balance between leveraging technology and what we experience in real life. So again, yeah, I think we were forced into fatigue a little bit just because we had no other choice of how to stay connected. But I think the future is going to be, at least in my hope, a lot more balanced. Great question.
Thanks, Bill. AR, VR is interesting, but will it be practical in a real world environment?
Wow. I had the same question when I put on those AR and VR headsets. I'm like, oh my God, are people really going to be adopting this? Yes, I really do feel it's going to be practical in the real world environment. And what I can tell you right now is that based on the findings from the AFCOM report, I mean, we're talking about like a quarter of respondents that are currently using AR and VR in a real world environment, in a data center, in a facility. They're trying to do things like 3D modeling, understand where something might fit in potentially, doing like scans of a room and using AR and VR to see how a digital twin of a facility might actually work. I do feel like this is the future. Because we are creating a perimeter-less business environment, right? There might be a case where an engineer and architect just puts one of these things on and sees a full active digital twin of a data center and can make decisions that are, more optimal to how things are placed, where things live potentially, and what they can do. I don't think it's going to replace any of the management functions. I still think that people are going to need to be in the data center, at least to some extent. But I feel like these tools, once they become a little bit more standardized and more user friendly, I absolutely believe they're going to be a part of working with us, of working within our industry. I mean, imagine, right? You've got a couple of these racks and you're trying to figure out, okay, do I put this converged, I don't care, Cisco UCS blade environment into this rack? You put it in. Okay, now let's do a live CFD, see how airflow is going to impact that. Oh my God, crap. I can't put this in here because it's going to completely mess up not just the rack, but the two neighboring ones as well. So I need to put this in a different facility or maybe in a different rack or a different section of my data center. Being able to make those decisions sort of live based on data-driven, results, I mean, that's pretty special. I think that's really cool. So I think it's going to help us as a tool set augment what we do in the data center.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Moving on to the next one. It seems like decreased personnel on site was driving the need for more remote monitoring management software solutions. Do you think the demand will decrease as more personnel come back on site?
I really don't think it's going to decrease. I think we're going to be changing the way we do remote monitoring and management, right? There's questions around things like SNMP and how information is being gathered. Making sure there's not vulnerabilities within our environment. I mean, goodness knows everyone's heard about the SolarWinds impact. And but actually that whole thing actually started in 2019. The actual infiltration of that infrastructure, and then obviously proliferated. These tools are really important. They really are to help us make proactive decisions around our environment. I don't think they're going to decrease because whether you're on site or remote, good monitoring and management tools are going to continue to be very, very important. I mean, probably going to be a balance. Maybe a few less licenses are going to be renewed, but I definitely think that these solutions are going to be important. And whether you're on site or remote, you need to have good management monitoring tools in place to keep your environment running healthy. So I don't necessarily think it's going to decrease. I mean, we as humans, we miss a lot, right? Because we're not perfect. We have to use these technologies and data to help us see things that we simply can't. So just because someone's back on site, I don't necessarily know that they're going to be using less of a good tool.
Very good point, Bill. Thank you. Next one, in regards to robots. I think that's the big question. What will robots be doing in the data center? Some sort of cleaning, perhaps?
What? Okay. All right. I don't know who asked this question. It says anonymous attendee, but I'm going to give you a virtual high five and a gold sticker. There was a really fun, I got a couple minutes to tell the story. A couple years ago, IBM and EMC actually did this. Oh my God. And you could, but I don't mind right now. If you actually Google this, Roomba in the data center, you're going to find this. So what they did is there's an open protocol, an open platform that you can actually take a Roomba. I won't say hack into it, but hack into it. And so what this facility did was they put an antenna up on this little robot Roomba, and it would float around. It would take measurements of airflow. It would have, I think, a laser on it. It would do like acid tagging, for example. So not only did you have live, and by the way, they integrated it with their DSIM tool set. So not only do you have like this live data around the performance of your data center, they also had very clean floors. Now, I don't think that everyone on this call is going to have a Roomba robot running around the data center and say, hey, Bill's right. We have a robot in the data center, and just this little guy, this little machine that's running around and then goes back to its docking station when it's done. That's a really good point. What are these things, these machines going to be doing in our data center? And that's maybe cleaning, maybe concierge. Maybe you have a very standardized drive system, and you can have a machine that's going to be taking out and putting drives in, sort of like a if you're lucky enough to have Dropbox in your facility or whatever the case might be, cold storage, for example. Otherwise, it might be concierge services. It might be security. It might be drone flights. It might be supporting edge or remote facilities to make sure that security is there, or if somebody comes on site, a machine can escort them indoors. Again, racking and stacking, actual physical servers, we're not there yet, not quite there yet. But that's the big question, right? Actually understanding what these robots are going to be doing and how they can help us with autonomous processes. We're very much in the beginning, early stages of understanding this and how it's going to be deployed, but I don't think this is something that's going to be going away.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Do data privacy laws impact a zero trust model? If so, how?
It's a great question. And yes, they really do. With GDPR, all of these sorts of PCI DSS, SOX, HIPAA, all of these different parameters they do, because what we talked about earlier is that zero trust is a perimeterless model, right? So it doesn't matter where you are, you can apply these. So based on context, if you remember that I had that one slide up, understanding who, what, where, how, why, and all of these questions, basically the interrogation of the user and the device and the access they have. You can ask these kinds of contextual questions. So let's say you're a user in the United States and you need to access a server that contains private information or PII or PHI in Europe, for example. So you can have a zero trust model in place that says, okay, well, you're a user in the United States. Here's what you have access to. Here's what you can actually do with this data, and so on. And again, that same context can be applied to somebody who is in Europe and accessing the same data that may be giving more rights, more privileges, and more access to this data. So where privacy laws impact zero trust, it's if you have a zero trust model in place and it's a good one, you have the right technologies in place. Let me put a caveat there. No one tool, no one solution, no one piece of software or hardware is a zero trust model. It's not. If somebody comes in and tries to sell you that, be like, okay, you can leave now because you don't know what zero trust is. It is literally a mindset, a process, a tool set, a psychological shift for a business potentially. And yes, the tools that are involved in this that encompass zero trust. So it's a few things you have to incorporate, and it is contextual to your business. So I do think that privacy laws are going to be impacted, definitely within zero trust. But because of a good model and a good ecosystem, if you set this up properly, you can actually create a very transparent model where the user won't even know that there are rules being enforced that might limit them from what they're being accessed or what they're accessing. And I think that makes it way easier than somebody just having a VPN into a European server, and then even accidentally breaking data privacy laws just because they have access to a server in Europe, right? This extra level of security will make sure that privacy laws are, depending on the country and the context, are consistently intact.
Great, thanks, Bill. Let me see if I understand this question here. The term of perimeterless does not include the near future. The physical data center perimeters and security isn't it? I think the question here is this concept of a perimeterless data center something that we're going to see in the near future right now, or is it further off in the future?
We were forced into it. And I do understand the question. We were forced into thinking about this at the very least, whether we like it or not. Please know, and I don't have time to get into all the crazy attacks that have been happening out there. I understand a data center has a perimeter. I do. I'm not trying to be naive. But the near future and how we're distributed with all these new infrastructures coming up with edge computing and remote facilities, micro edge, even mist computing is a new term people should be taking a look at. I do feel the concept of a perimeter has fundamentally changed to where really there's not one definition for it because of how data traverses your devices, the cloud, and private networks. So it's here. The concept of a perimeterless security and architecture and zero trust specifically is already here. The fact that more than 40% of respondents said they're going to be deploying for the next 12 months is huge. I honestly expected that number to be less, but this is something that's very, very much top of mind for all users out there to make sure that they have a security model that's in place. And it doesn't matter what your budget is either. You can implement models of zero trust. Low-hanging fruit is security awareness. You want to create a better posture, train your users, make them more intelligent, make sure that they understand the security model and the implications of their behaviors. That's low-hanging fruit right there, where you might not even need to deploy any new systems yet. You just need to train your users a little bit better. So it's here already, and I think it's only going to proliferate.
Excellent, thanks. Now it looks like you got into the next question, which was, with limited budget, what should be the low-hanging fruit to implementing a zero trust model?
Right. And again, for everybody listening, start with your users. Behavioral training, posturing of user, eliminating risky behavior. It's a huge part of zero trust, right? Having people report on a phishing email, just asking deeper contextual questions like, hang on a second, my CEO just sent me an email saying that I need to go and pick up a $500 Apple Card. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Or maybe I should text my CEO, like, you really want me to do this, man? But that's kind of the idea. If you don't have a lot of money, you can work with good partners, and this is a low budget item, is to do things like user awareness training over 12 months, where you'll work with a partner and they'll do things like test and simulated phishing attacks, where your users will learn what is non-malicious and what's something they shouldn't be clicking on. That's a really great start. Simple email security is a really, really great start to zero trust, right? You phishing attacks and these malware attacks come in through your inbox. Great way to begin your process. And alongside that, make sure you simply train your users. There's a couple of other small things that you can do to impact your security posture, but you don't have to like completely break the bank to be more secure.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. I think that is all the time we have left for today. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. And Bill, a big thanks to you. It's always a pleasure having you present for us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thanks, everybody.